Welcome to the Flowing Forward podcast, the economics of water in a changing world, a platform dedicated to exploring the pivotal role of water in shaping our global future. Today, we're honored to present an enlightening discussion between Lauren Andersen and Ram Fishman.
By merging all this data together, we were able to start for the first time to quantify some of the linkages between hydrological cycle and human outcomes and human risk and human welfare.
There's a lot more unanswered questions left. We've kind of only scratched the surface.
There's so much we don't know about these things and so many questions that really urgently need to be answered.
I'm Lauren Andersen. I'm a senior researcher at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research.
Hi, I'm Ram Fishman. I'm a professor of public policy at Tel Aviv University.
Lauren and Ram are at the forefront of groundbreaking research, meticulously examining the intricate linkages between the hydrological cycle and human outcomes. Their pioneering work involves the integration of diverse data sets, offering new insights into the profound connections that bind water dynamics to human welfare. This collaborative endeavor spans across Tel Aviv, Rome, Berlin, and Santa Barbara, highlighting the global nature and urgency of their mission. Join us as we delve into their innovative methodologies and the critical questions driving their research, and a behind-the-scenes look at the work of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. This episode promises a deep dive into the complexities of atmospheric moisture recycling, human risk, and the broader implications for global water sustainability. Prepare for a thought-provoking conversation that not only enhances our understanding, but also inspires action toward a more sustainable and equitable future. Stay with us until the end of the episode for important details about the upcoming launch of our final report in October.
I think the initial research question was, can we say anything about what the significance of these moisture flows are in terms of humans, in terms of the economy, in terms of how many people are affected, et cetera, and in what ways? How important are they? Because, right, in your group, Lauren, you've already shown that these flows are, in physical magnitude, they are very important and substantial. But what we didn't know was, in terms of human systems, the economy and human welfare, how important they are. So that was our starting point.
And then also the social layer on top of that. What types of places and people are relying on this type of water source? Because it's been limited, to the blue water discussion, to the water in rivers. This is thought of as the source of water. So we're trying to step back and think about the precipitation source and understanding it's not as reliable as we might think.
So how did we actually start?
Well, we met over Zoom.
Right.
From researchers from Tel Aviv, Rome, Berlin, and Santa Barbara.
Right.
Across many time zones.
Yeah, different timing was difficult.
And we coordinated.
You guys ruined my evenings. We ruined
mornings the end
in
of
Santa
my
Barbara.
workday. I had to stay very late at the Institute.
Yeah.
Because the meetings always took twice as long as promised.
Right.
Yeah. And we coordinated a big data exchange, I guess.
Yeah.
So
we sent a lot of data across the ocean.
We certainly did. We had to prepare a large data set of atmospheric moisture flows.
Yeah.
From, processed at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research.
We asked you to tell us how much moisture flows from every single location in the world to every single other location. And when you sent us that, the internet collapsed for a few days, basically.
Yeah.
Nobody could log onto their Facebook accounts. Yeah.
And then from there, we asked you to answer all the economic questions. Our work was done once you had all of that.
That's what you thought, but
yeah.
We kept coming back with more questions. Yeah, so we took all that data and then we integrated it with very detailed spatial data about how many people live in every location around the world, and how many poor people live everywhere, and where is land irrigated and cultivated, and where it's rain-fed. So by merging all this data together, we were able to start for the first time to quantify some of the linkages between the hydrological cycle and human outcomes and human risk and human welfare.
And what the data was on a grid-by-grid scale for the whole globe, like a counting of where all of the moisture that arrives in that grid comes from and where all the moisture evapotranspiring from that grid goes to. And so with this gridded data, you could imagine drawing like a circle around any group of them representing like a country or a basin or just that grid itself and track all the moisture coming and going. So it's a fairly large data set with a lot of information that could be unlocked. And
mathematically, it's like a matrix, right?
Yeah.
How many rows are in that matrix?
I don't remember.
But a lot.
Like 70,000?
Yeah, something like that. So it's a very big matrix.
It's very big, yes.
Yeah. First of all, our team in Santa Barbara, technically, there was a lot of work going into preparing and coalescing that data. I'm sure there was a lot of work in PIC also went into preparing that data.
Yeah. Yeah. The data comes from a moisture tracking model, but it's just flows going back and forth until some person with a post-processing idea implements it and makes sense of it. So we try to make sense of this moisture tracking data on a grid that we could share with you so you could then do economic analysis.
And it's always fun and interesting when economists and natural scientists talk to each other. We use slightly different language. We have slightly different ways of thinking about stuff. So it's very fruitful and sometimes a little bit challenging.
Yeah. Mostly the economists want to race ahead and answer things like on the bleeding edge of what the scientific data will support. So we were really always trying to find out, what can we responsibly let you do with this data, I think. And I think we got there.
Yeah, I think we did some irresponsible things with that data too. You know, there's this time when you work on this kind of analysis where there's a lot of preparatory work and you get the data going and it's all this really mechanical and ungratifying work. And finally, you get to the point where you can actually finally run that calculation that you've been looking forward to running for months. And you don't know what's going to come out, whether it's going to be interesting or not. And I think one of the moments was when some of the researchers in Santa Barbara that were actually doing the grunt work of this actually ran it. And we actually found that the impacts of these moisture flows on economic growth are really large and dramatic. So that's pretty exciting when that happens.
Up until that point, on our side at the Potsdam Institute, we'd only been able to kind of hypothesize what would happen if moisture flows from a certain area were just removed from the equation, so to speak. And we presumed there would be an impact downwind from removing those flows, but we didn't have the ability to put an economic analysis on top of that. So it just ended with the change in that moisture. So this was an interesting missing piece to confirm. I mean, of course, there would be an impact to remove that much moisture from the atmospheric flows. But now we got an answer like how that would actually look in terms of the economic impact.
And I think also that comes about by talking to scientists from another discipline. We usually each stuck in our own discipline and have certain questions we think about, and we don't really understand maybe the way the data that other disciplines use or how they think about stuff. So that can be challenging, but it's also sometimes really fruitful because it enables like really novel insights to emerge. And that was very satisfying, I think.
It was also interesting how your team could overlay it with the socioeconomic indicators like what types of people were exposed to those losses. That was also something that we couldn't necessarily see only in the
Yes.
water flow data.
And then there were also, that also can lead to, there were some kind of shocking moments when, sometimes we just take the data from them. We may not understand it well enough to catch if we're doing something wrong. And we had a moment about a week before we were supposed to disseminate our results where Simon and Lauren's team just realized that something was wrong with the maps that we were producing. And then that revealed that there was actually the whole matrix that we got from them, we used it in the wrong way.
It was a transposing mistake. So you perfectly analyzed it upside down.
Right, exactly.
Basically.
And we didn't know it was upside down because we only understand the economics of it. It was hard for us to tell that something was wrong in the physics it was showing. So
we caught it, don't worry.
Luckily they caught it a few days before we almost had a heart attack, but our team is so strong they managed to redo everything in time.
There's a lot more unanswered questions left. We've kind of only scratched the surface. Part of it is limited by the time we have right now to work on it. Part of it is limited, though, by what the moisture flow models can properly simulate under future and changed conditions. So we have set up this interesting analysis that shows the impacts under the current situation. But of course, it makes you wonder, okay, what if climate changes and land use changes and both things change at the same time? But it's not so easy to set this up in the model because it only reflects the current tracks.
We would want to explore many other scenarios. Until now, we only looked at two very stylized scenarios. One is if you somehow magically remove all moisture from forests in the world. That's just for illustrative purposes. It's not a realistic scenario. And once we saw that we could analyze the impacts of that, we got excited and we said, Lauren, Simon, can you now tell us what happens if you only remove the forest here, or only remove the forest here, or that is replaced with grassland? And we hit them with all these questions, and they're like, no, it's not that easy. We can't give you all these scenarios so quickly.
Yeah, what if it's converted to grassland or irrigated agriculture? Then you have to really be confident in the new evapotranspiration from the changed land use, and this also feeds back into the moisture tracks themselves. So
it's almost like, maybe this is a little bit silly as a metaphor, but it's almost like we built a new musical instrument together and we only got to play one or two songs on it, and then we had to stop, and there's so many other songs we want to play with this instrument. I think the more we do this, I think the more shocking it is to me how little research we actually have to provide us with the evidence that we so sorely need to be able to inform policymakers and commissions such as this one about the nature of these dynamics and risks. And so that's why there's so much more we want to do. There's so much more we want the broader research community to do, because there's so much we don't know about these things, and so many questions that really urgently need to be answered. And the more we engage with the policymakers, I think, and people like the commissioners and the chairs, the more we realize how much more evidence we need to supply them in order to properly inform them about the outreach work they do and the policy work that they do.
There is groups of researchers and networks actively working on the terrestrial moisture recycling and trying to understand the fate of atmospheric water from sink to source, and understand which areas are relying on this recycled moisture, and it expands the water resilience narrative. But it's probably a little scary to take on these ideas outside of academia, because it explodes the current concept we have of transboundary water. When you lift that off the ground and take it into the air, it implicates a lot larger areas, it implicates more countries, across the ocean. It's hard to think about governing that or cooperating with that. It's maybe hard to think about that the land use decisions you make in your country affect countries far away, or that you're also vulnerable to far away land use decisions.
I think actually a lot of researchers are actually getting into the field, and there's more work on water, luckily. But usually in science, I think funding is a big part of it. And that's where science policy comes into the picture. To be exposed and to take part in discussions that are different in nature from the discussions that we have in academia. Like, maybe they're not as, we are very, very much evidence-based, very much data-based. And of course, when you get into these kind of discussions, things are a little bit more, flexible, which they have to be because they don't have the luxury of only answering the things that can be answered very rigorously. They have to be able to say something to the real world. But it's really like moving into another kind of culture, maybe. And at times it was inspiring, in times it was frustrating for me, but I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this, because this is the real world. And this is, if you want to have an impact, and I think probably both of us, part of the reason we're doing this kind of science is because we want to have an impact. It has to go that way.
Yeah, you want it to be useful to somebody and not just sit on a shelf in a paper collecting dust.
Yes. Although I don't know if you're aware, but papers are not collecting dust anymore. They're just collecting like electricity.
I still print out papers to read.
Oh,
yeah.
I have not printed out a paper in years, in decades.
I don't like the screen time. That I limit my screen time.
Can't be bothered finding a printer.
The timeline of a normal research sort of trajectory is much slower, where you take a slower pace. And here, as soon as you get a result and you show it, they digest it so fast. Oh, that's so exciting. And then they're on to the next things they want you to do with it immediately.
And that's scary.
That's a little scary, but also, what was your word? Inspiring. Yeah, it's to try and keep up with the pace of their enthusiasm for it,
The inspiring thing, I think, is when you do some analysis and you share it with people who can then share it with so many more people than you would ever reach on your own through a scientific publication. So there's something inspiring about that, and they can relate that to the kind of discussion. It becomes an input into the kind of discussion that actually matter. That's inspiring. One of my hopes or expectations from the committee is that they actually use their voice to try to push forward, a stronger research effort on these issues, and to find a way to support it and fund it and get more researchers involved, etc. I really hope this is one of the outcomes that emerges out of the Commission's work.
Thank you for joining us on this critical exploration of water economics and its far-reaching impact on our world. We trust that today's discussion with Lauren Andersen and Ram Fishman has provided you with valuable insights into the vital connections between the hydrological cycle and human welfare, and a behind-the-scenes look at the work of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. We are pleased to announce the forthcoming launch of our final report on October 17. This comprehensive document will deliver crucial insights and actionable recommendations, pivotal for advancing global water sustainability. Subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media to be the first to know. Continue to engage with our podcast for more authoritative discussions, expert interviews, and the latest updates in water economics. Your support and interest are invaluable as we collectively strive for a sustainable and equitable future. Thank you for listening.